We know that the old economic development model that said, give a car factory a $1 billion incentive and say they're going to create 200 full-time jobs actually doesn't work, right? We know that jobs don't attract people. We know that people attract jobs. We need to fix City Hall. It is broken. It is broken beyond human understanding. It's okay. Break the system, take some risks, make some mistakes, because we know that when we come out of it on the other end, it's going to be a better place. Transit solves so many problems. Congestion, air pollution, even social isolation. If you can get people living in poverty to their jobs without needing a car, it makes huge differences. What I am suggesting is that every single department, no one is exempt from presenting cost-saving ideas. Not the police, not the fire department, and sadly not the library. They teach you on day 3 of bureaucrat school. When you are threatened with a budget cut, propose the most politically untenable budget cut, and they will never cut your budget. The most interesting thing about the polling is that my name recognition, people who've heard of me, is almost at the bottom. I think I'm 14 out of 15. Yet, we're 3rd in voter intention. What that means is that people who've heard the message are voting. Right? No one else has numbers like that. So our path is relatively straightforward. Get more people to hear the message. Thank you all for coming tonight. You know, we've been spending the last 4 or 5 months, it's been a while, hasn't it, Brenda? Since I declared my candidacy, in lots of conversations like this, in conversations in people's living rooms, in cool bars, in not so cool bars, on 1 or 2 occasions this entire summer where we got some sunshine in people's backyards, modeling what I talk about in terms of what the city needs to do in terms of the campaign that we're having. Because what I talk about when I talk about what the city needs to do is I talk about the need for us to come together as community, to have real grown-up conversations about what we want from our community and how we're going to get there. When you're a politician, you're supposed to have an elevator pitch. You're supposed to be able to say everything you want to say about your campaign in 15 to 30 seconds. And I'm proud to share with you today that I reached a new milestone this week. I've managed to get my elevator pitch down to 5.5 minutes. So if you get in an elevator with me, we do have to press the stop button, the alarms go off, but you do get to learn a lot about the city, which is outstanding. I really, really love this city. I grew up in Marlborough, maybe a 12-minute C train ride away from here. Son of immigrants, first-generation Canadian. You know, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but what I did have was a lot of opportunity. I had the opportunity to graduate from excellent public schools. I had the opportunity to really harass the librarians at the Forest Lawn Public Library. The opportunity to learn to swim very, very badly at a public pool. Don't ask me to do a swim test to this day. I had the opportunity to explore this great city on public transit. And those opportunities really were what made me who I am today. I wouldn't be this person without that. My political philosophy is pretty straightforward. It's simply that every kid growing up in this city, in East Calgary or West Calgary, in any community in the city, deserves to have that kind of opportunity. And that opportunity sometimes comes only from all of us working together as a community. So that's really where I come from. I worked in business for a long time. I have my own little consulting firm. I worked for a big consulting firm for a long time. I lived and worked in cities around the world before I had the chance to move back home and come back to Calgary. And here I do 3 things. I'm a professor at Mount Royal University. I teach in the business school. I train young people, mostly young people, on how to run nonprofit organizations and how nonprofit organizations can be more effective. I work with clients in the private, public, and government sectors around how they can be more efficient. I always say I'm the only guy you'll ever meet whose 2 biggest clients are the Gap and the United Nations. And the 3rd thing, and probably the most important thing, is I love cities. I love this city, but I also love cities. So I've done a lot of work in urban issues. I wrote a little book about 10 years ago on urban issues that made me a media superstar among people who care about cities, which is about that big. But it gave me the opportunity to become the civic affairs columnist for the Calgary Herald and for CBC Radio 1 for the last several years, which means I go to city council meetings so you don't have to. Trust me, you owe me. But over the course of the last couple of years, not only have I gotten more frustrated, but I have sensed that Calgarians are getting more frustrated. We're getting frustrated by a city council that doesn't really reflect who we are as a people. You know, I always say that the worst thing about Calgary, is our city council. The people are wonderful, they're risk-taking, they're innovative, they want to make change, they know there's better ways to do things, they want to build communities that work, and our city council is forever slow, lagging, falling, dragging behind. And this is something that we have to be able to change. So what do I stand for? 3 things. The first is sustainability. And when I use that word, I mean environmental, financial, and social sustainability. Every time we build a house on the fringes of the city, that new house costs us $10,000 more just in water and sewer infrastructure than we will ever get back in a lifetime of property taxes from that homeowner. And we put 5,000 of those up a year. So we have a city council that spent endless hours fighting about whether to close 2 lanes of traffic on Memorial Drive on a sunny Sunday afternoon. And they didn't seem to notice that while they were fighting about that, that water and sewer infrastructure deficit became $1.5 billion. That number is almost unimaginably large. And we have to pay it back. We have to pay it back. Our kids have to pay it back, hopefully not our grandkids. You want to know how much the Bow River flow cost when they closed Memorial Drive? $5,000. Not including the endless hours that they fought about it in council. Right? It's a matter of priorities. There's good news. And the good news is we can fix it. We can build more complete communities at the edges of the city. We can change how we charge for new homes and new developments. We can have incentives to invest in the inner city and build livable, lovable, walkable communities across the whole city. We know how to do it. We just need the leadership to get there. And we need to build those communities that Calgarians have said that they want. You know, I've talked to thousands of Calgarians over the summer, and I always ask, what's a good city for you? What changes do you want? And what's remarkable is they always say the same thing. It doesn't matter if you self-identify as conservative or liberal or left-wing or right-wing, if you're young or you're old, you've got kids or you're single, everyone says the same thing. I want to live in a neighborhood where I can walk to the store. I want to live in a neighborhood where my kids can walk to school. I want to live in a neighborhood that's safe and welcoming and diverse and lots of different people live there. I want to live in a neighborhood where when I'm old and my kids have left home, I can still stay in the same neighborhood. And I want to live in a neighborhood where we can get by with 1 car, not 2, 3, or 4 cars. These are basic things, and they don't happen by accident. But we need a city that can help us build that. So sustainability. Number 2. Calgary needs to be the best place in Canada to start and grow your business and to raise a family. And it might sound funny that I put those 2 things together, but in fact, a lot of the kinds of things that we do really are helpful for both. You know, I believe in private enterprise. Enterprise is the engine of our growth, and we have to make it easy for entrepreneurs to be able to do their work here. So the first part of that is making the city a partner, making the city a problem solver instead of a regulator and a barrier builder and someone who prevents you from being able to succeed. The restaurant owner in Northeast Calgary, he's now $11,000 and 6 months into a permitting process to get a permit to change his light fixtures. He told me he wanted to have a patio, and he figures if he starts right now and works really hard and hires a bunch of lawyers and consultants, he'll be able to open his patio in May 2012. By the way, I was meeting with the city manager earlier this week and I told him that story, and he said, that is not true. We could have it done by December 2011. It's a patio. December, it's a patio. We got to change the mindset of that file manager at City Hall from, I need that guy to fill out every form in quadruplicate, I need him to check off every box, and I'm terrified of making a mistake, to my success is when that guy is serving beer on that patio on the first sunny day next April. What's even more important than that is something that's close to a lot of you in the room, which is that Calgary needs to be a magnet. It needs to be a magnet for the best young people, not just young, the best talent from around the world. We need to be able to convince people to come here, to make a living here, to make a life here, to invest here, to start their businesses here. The good news is we know how to do that. We know that the old economic development model that said, give a car factory a $1 billion incentive and say they're going to create 200 full-time jobs actually doesn't work. Right? We know that jobs don't attract people. We know that people attract jobs. And we do a great job of getting people to move here during boom times. Right? You all know that. You've lived through the congestion and trouble of the last boom. but we do a lousy job of keeping them. You know, the boom slows down, people leave. This doesn't happen everywhere. You look at places where there are real hubs of innovation, like Silicon Valley, for example. When the dot-com bubble bursts, the people stick around. They stick around and they start new businesses. They meet up with friends that they know. They try new things. And they go through wave 2, wave 3, wave 4. We know what it is that attracts people to cities. And what attracts people to cities is the urban fabric, the vitality of the city, the vibrancy of the city. That means that investments in things like arts and culture, investments in things like parks and recreation and sports are not just good for themselves. We should invest in art because art's good, right? But they're also good for hard-nosed business reasons. It's the ballet effect. We know that everyone wants to live in a city that has a great ballet, even though none of them will ever go to the ballet. It's part of the brand. It's part of being in a place that has energy and vibrancy. We want to make sure that the Mark Hopkins of the world figure that they can do theater here as good as anywhere, right? And we need to be able to support that. So that's really the big piece of how we make Calgary the best place in Canada to start and grow a business and raise a family. That's what it's all about. Third thing, this one's not quite so happy. We need to fix City Hall. It is broken. It is broken beyond human understanding. City Council spends its time on the wrong things, it spends our money badly, and there is no oversight. Many of you probably have heard of the famous auditor's report that came out earlier this year. The auditor examined a sample of 540 contracts worth a total of $200 million that the city had put out. Out of those 540, do you know how many of them went over budget? 540, 100%. And the amount by which they went over budget was supposed to be $200 million. We spent $950 million. $750 million. Suddenly the bow flow doesn't sound like such a big deal, huh? $700 million, and nobody noticed. That is a symptom of a system that is severely broken. But there's good news. And the good news is we can fix it. Governments around the world have fixed it. They've reformed their bureaucracies, they've implemented better budgeting processes, better incentives for their employees, much better auditing, Lord knows, and most important, better services for citizens. This isn't going to be easy. The hard work starts on October 19th. And we're going to make a lot of mistakes. But what we need to do is we need to be able to move to a world where the citizens say, it's okay, break the system, take some risks, make some mistakes, because we know that when we come out of it on the other end, it's going to be a better place. And that's when I start talking about grown-up conversations, because those are the kinds of conversations we need to have with people. The most exciting thing about this journey over the last 4 months, though, we've had big groups, giant groups, we've had tiny groups, but things have really changed. At the beginning, people were saying, you know, Naheed, good for you. It's good that you're doing this. It's good that you're elevating the debate. It's good that you're talking about things that really matter because the other politicians aren't. But we're not having that conversation anymore. The conversation we're having now is, oh my God, this is actually going to change. And what we've really got is we have a movement going on here. We have a movement of citizens who are saying, I've had enough. I want that better city, and I want a city council who reflects what I really want. It's about engaging people and making that kind of change. And that's what's exciting, because people are joining the movement. They're saying, what we've got isn't good enough. What we've got isn't good enough, and we can do better. And that's what's really exciting, because that's our opportunity to make real change. And with your help, we'll be able to make that change. Why don't I stop there? We'll take a couple of questions. We'll see how things go.
I got a phone call from the automated system, and one of the things it said was Calgary Transit should be the first destination for Calgarians, not the last. What are some of your ideas for improving Calgary Transit?
Before I answer your question, I'll open a bracket. One of the things that I've really been excited about this campaign is the fact that we've really been able to engage people in politics in full sentences. We've been releasing new platform ideas regularly. People have really engaged on them and really said, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And sometimes when I'm feeling a bit mean about my competitors, I go, wow, any one of our 8 better ideas, there's still 5 or 6 to come, but any one of them has more words in it than the entire platform of my top 3 competitors combined. Better idea number 3, Calgary Transit should be a preferred choice, not the last choice. When you have a small town, You think of transit as an expense you have to manage. You got to have a transit system so the old people can get around and the kids can get to school and people who don't drive can get around. But you think of it as an expense and you try to minimize the cost to the city of that. When you've got a city of 1 million people, you have to completely flip your mindset and say transit is an investment in the quality of life of the city. Transit solves so many problems. Congestion, air pollution, even social isolation. If you can get people living in poverty to their jobs without needing a car, it makes huge differences. So you have to invest in it. Like Kevin Costner, if you build it, they will come. Yes, we do need to build the Southeast LRT, and we do need to build the Stephen Avenue subway tunnel to make that work. What we need to do now is we really need to use flexible tools that we have in order to try new things to get people who aren't using transit now to use it. Those flexible tools are called buses. And we need to invest much more in express buses, in new kinds of bus routes that get people from place to place. You know, our transit system works very, very, very well for getting people downtown during rush hour and home again during rush hour. In fact, we have one of the highest per capita riderships in North America for people doing that particular commute. It doesn't work well for anybody else. I got in trouble about this because they said, you're not a transit planner. You shouldn't be talking about bus routes. To which my answer is, well, it doesn't sound like anybody's a transit planner in this city, so I'm as good as anybody else. Why don't we have an express bus route that never goes downtown, but actually goes from Whitehorn Station or McKnight Station in Northeast Calgary, University of Calgary, Foothills Hospital, Mount Royal University, Chinook Station, getting students to and from those campuses without ever having to burden the infrastructure going downtown where we know the C trains are already full. These are the sorts of things that we need to think through. Finally, Calgary Transit needs to learn that it is about the riders. Not about the budget, not about the network, not about the employees, about the riders. People in other cities are always horrified when I say, you know, our transit machines don't actually give change. They don't take credit cards, cell phones, broken half the time. Try telling that to the cop. A friend of mine who's kind of in the vending machine business looked at me and said, it's actually hard to buy a vending machine that doesn't give change, right? It's actually expensive and hard to do that because, you know, it's $2.75 and they want to keep your extra quarter. We can't live like that anymore. So one of the things I'm proposing is a transit advisory committee which is made up of riders. It's a first step. We looked at lots of different governance models for transit because we need to give it a good kick to break it out of its complacency. I think this is a good first step to really bring the needs of riders forefront, but we got to do a much better job.
So do you have a good model for a transit system for a city our size that you're kind of going towards? Or is it...
I don't want to copy whole hog anybody because I think that there's lots of good elements in lots of different places. I do like the Ottawa model when I talk about buses. When we talk about rail and how rail can be more effective and transit-oriented development among rail stations, I think interesting things are happening in Vancouver and in Toronto. So there's a bunch of stuff we can learn from. I'm kind of a transit nerd. My friends that I travel with really hate it because when we go traveling in exotic places, I never let them take a cab anywhere. And I always take transit from the airport. What's the one city I've never taken transit from the airport in?
Calgary.
It's a bit of a problem, right?
You mentioned the importance of the Forest Lawn Library to you as a child when you were growing up here. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the importance of libraries in general to Calgary, especially in light of the potential cuts to hours.
Can I add that the only library in the entire Northeast is the Forest Lawn Library?
No, Village Square.
Oh, there's a library there because it's not listed.
Yeah, Village Square. More northeast. Forest Lawn's actually in the southeast.
Oh, right, my bad.
No, I always correct people. When I'm mad at Forest Lawn, I go, that's not the northeast. When I like them, I say it's East Calgary. This whole issue makes me a little bit angry. First of all, obviously, I have a huge soft spot for libraries. I think public libraries are incredibly important, particularly in areas where you have a large English as a second language population. I think it's a crime that Calgary is the only city in Canada that charges for a library card, and I think we have to support them as best we can. Do you sense there's a but coming? However, this past council has put us in an extremely difficult situation. They've given us a lovely present for when we're elected. I call it well, I shouldn't say what I call it publicly. I don't have a nice name for it. They've given us a lovely gift-wrapped present on the doorstep, which is a $60 million deficit. And the new council will have less than a month to figure out, because cities aren't allowed to run deficits, it'll have less than a month to figure out how to close that deficit. What I am suggesting is that every single department, no one is exempt from presenting cost-saving ideas. Not the police, not the fire department, and sadly not the library. Now what we've had is we've had a lot of bureaucrats doing an excellent bureaucratic thing, which is like they teach you on day 3 of bureaucrat school. When you are threatened with a budget cut, propose the most politically untenable budget cut, and they will never cut your budget. And I'm sorry to say that the director of the library has done that. And he has said, well, we're not going to open the Saddletown branch, the new Northeast Library, and we're going to not have any branches open on Sundays. My answer to Mr. Meeks is, you're going to open the branch on time, and you're going to have some libraries open on Sundays, and we're going to talk more about cost savings, right? So for example, I don't know the answer to these questions, but I know what questions to ask. Have you examined every single branch and looked at what the lowest usage is during the week? Some branches it might be Tuesday afternoon. Some branches it might be Wednesday morning. Have you determined whether you can do service cutbacks at different times in different branches so you don't have to lay people off and they can go and work at different branches? Have you considered a system where there is always a library within the quadrant that's open even if the other ones are closed? And by the way, Sundays, come on, right? We don't live in a world where families don't go to the library on Sundays anymore. I don't know the answers to these questions. We have to ask them all. Because unfortunately for the 2011 budget year, we're going to have to close that deficit. The good news is, by the time the 2012 budget year rolls around, we will have had enough time to implement a lot of the new budgeting processes I'm talking about to find savings and efficiencies across the system, and hopefully we can restore whatever we had to do for 2011.
How are you going to avoid kind of going in there with broad change and then ending up with the Obama effect?
What I have to rely on is historical precedent, right? Unlike Obama, where there was change that was being proposed that had never been done before anywhere, that had never been seen before. What I'm proposing for the city of Calgary is, we're stuck in the 1960s, let's at least make it to the 1990s. Yeah, I'm not talking about 2020 yet. So there's a lot of historical precedent for the kinds of things we're doing, and we need to learn from that. We need to get away from the not invented here syndrome, right, where we have to create everything from scratch here in Calgary. I've also started laying the groundwork for this by talking to senior city managers as well as existing council members and people who are running for council to say, how do we make this happen? You know, at the level where, for example, I might talk to a senior city manager and say, look, and I have done this in the last few weeks, look, if I'm elected, we're going to make massive change in this organization. So my question for you with the door shut is, are you my guy? Are you the guy who has the appetite to do that? Do you have the ability to lead that? Because it's going to happen regardless. We are going to disempower people who benefit from the current system. That's going to be really tough, and people are going to be mean about it, right? But we have to operate in an open way with the public, with the citizens, in a transparent way, always with the goal in mind. Right? Always with the goal in mind to say, together we're going to make this community better, and you have to forgive us the missteps along the way. And you know, that's all I can say. I can go on into the textbooks about how you make organizational change, and I do know that stuff, and I do understand it. But it really starts with the headlines, right? Which is, how do we work together to be able to create the community we all need? And I have to believe it can be done. I have to believe it can be done. I cannot, and I hope none of you can, sit back and go, it's never going to change. We can't fix it. We're stuck with what we've got, because it's not good enough. It's not good enough for us. It's not good enough for the generations that come by after us. So I have to remain optimistic. It's the only way to go on, that we'll be able to do it.
Which social investment would you say has provided the greatest social contribution?
What social investment in cities has made the most difference? And I would tell you, going back to our first question, that it's public transit. That if we can figure out ways to make a transit system work for people, then it solves many, 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 many problems that we otherwise run into, and problems around community. There are many, many, many others, right? The public realm, public space, parks, areas that make people feel good. But if I had to pick one, I think I would pick transit.
One of the points on your platform is development, especially urban sprawl, and that is largely held up by a strong development community and companies. If everything works out and you win, they're not going away, and they're going to continue to exert influence. How do you combat that?
You know, I don't want them to go away. I don't know how to build a house. I'm no good with a hammer, trust me. We need them to be partners in all of this, but that doesn't mean we need to be pushovers. Probably the most surprising thing about this campaign for me to date is the conversations I've been having with the development community. So they're running an initiative called votecalgary.ca, where they're inviting all of the candidates to come in. So I had my votecalgary.ca interview, and all these people were warning me. They're like, Naheed, you know what happens at that interview, right? And I said, you talk about development? And they said, no. At the end of the interview, If they like what you said, they're going to slide over an envelope. And if they don't like what you said, there'll be no envelope. And I heard that and I went, well, I hope it's cash. They did not slide over an envelope. I actually told them, where's my envelope? There are no envelopes. But in fact, what we had was a really, again, an adult discussion, right? And I said, look, what I offer to you is that I'm not playing games with you. I will not use you as a political football, right? I'm not going to agree with you all the time. But if we can have discussions about the future of this city together, openly, I think votecalgary.ca, by the way, is a great thing. In the past, they tried to influence elections simply by campaign donations, right? And now they're actually putting their agenda out there and asking candidates to respond to it. I think that's a good thing. I still haven't gotten any money from them, but I've been really impressed at their willingness to engage. I sat down with one developer who's building a community that I really like. As the newest communities that are just being built now are quite different than the ones that were built 5 years ago, and they get a lot of it. There's stuff in South Calgary, Seaton and Mahogany, which are the first neighborhoods in Calgary expressly built around transit. So I said to these folks, look, long before I ran for mayor, I was talking about your neighborhoods as examples of what developers could do that works, that makes sense. They're beautiful neighborhoods that people want to live in, but they have a significantly lower footprint. And I said, so what happens if you fail? If my policies make you fail, how do I look, right? I need you to be leaders. I need you to be able to set the example for your fellow developers and also for developers around the country that this works and this can be done. And as soon as I said that, it changed everything, right? And they said, okay, you're a guy we can have adult conversations with. And that's really, I think, what it's about. We need them at the table, but they can't dictate the terms anymore. And I've been very clear on that what they did on Planet was wrong. It was a mistake both in terms of policy and it was a mistake in terms of politics. And, they get it. They kind of know. And so I think we can move forward with them. And I really don't want to build the houses.
What will your position and stance be in working with the province to promote Calgary as a viable choice for filmmaking?
I feel like the filmmakers have planted that question at all the forums.
With Alberta Film and any of the filmmakers, they've lost so many wonderful opportunities to make the city a ton of money, and they've had to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, Vancouver, and it trickles all the way down to little film festivals and those people who are working with children in the school systems to promote them to be filmmakers and say, yes, you can be a filmmaker, but go to Vancouver. It's a huge moneymaker for the city. What's your position on that?
As I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge fan of arts and culture in all their forms. I'm a big supporter of the film festival, of the various film festivals, and so on. But this is a challenging one because film is one of those industries where we are, for better or for worse, embroiled in a war of subsidy, right? Where anytime we assist filmmakers to do their work, someone else is going to have a bigger subsidy. Province is really dealing with it and the city is really dealing with it. So there are points at which there's stuff we should do. The city should support the creation of a state-of-the-art soundstage and studio system in the city. That's unquestionable, right? If we have the land, we should give the land. I mean, we need to do that stuff. When it starts to get in stuff that's outside of the city's hands, like tax incentives and so on, that's where it gets much, much trickier. Because you said something interesting. You said these films make a ton of money, right? So we have to really be careful that we're differentiating between filmmaking for the sake of art, filmmaking that is commercial, and I think abide by different rules on those, right? Which one is a social investment, whereas the other is a financial investment and should be treated as other financial investments are. I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not generally hugely in favor of incentives and subsidies to get business to come. Film is a special case, but it still has to prove its case as much as any other. And I'm asking lots of film people in the film industry to help me understand that better, so we'll talk later.
I read a recent poll that put you in the top 3, which I think is really exciting. But I know your 2 main competitors have huge war chests. They're going to throw at traditional media, billboards, like supper time news. And I'm wondering, how can you or how can we win?
Who wants to talk politics for a minute? Actual, honest to goodness politics. Our strategy had always been be in 3rd place on Labor Day. From day one, right, Brenda? I'm not lying about that, right? The strategy had always been be in 3rd place on Labor Day. because we don't have the money to do the giant media buys. The strategy that we followed through the summer was to get people like you talking. It was very deliberate, because every one of you in this room I know has friends who say to them, hey, who should I vote for? And so you're the people who need to become my evangelists, right? And that's what we've been working on for the last 3 or 4 months. And on Labor Day, it was like you flipped a switch, because suddenly all those people we'd been talking to all summer and were trying to too polite to talk to their friends about politics during the summer started talking to their friends about politics. We went up in our internal polling by double digits in the course of 2 weeks. And that's exactly what I thought would happen, and I was kind of a little bit shocked that it did. So we're in a situation right now where there's only 3 people who can win this race. Everyone else is done. So Alderman McIver, if the vote were held today, would win. His support has been a little more solid than I anticipated it would be, but it's starting to leak. That's our challenge. We've got to figure out a way to consolidate other votes, but also leak his votes a little bit. Ms. Higgins is dropping like a stone, if the polls are to be believed. That's not such a bad thing. We have to start framing this debate, and that's where you guys can be very, very helpful. There are still some traditional media out there who say it's a 2-person race. We need to get the narrative in place that this is a 3-person race. And as soon as we do that, as soon as we get to regular Calgarians that they've got 3 choices, McIver, Higgins, me, then we're going to win. Because the most interesting thing about the polling, is that my name recognition, people who've heard of me, is almost at the bottom. I think I'm 14 out of 15. Yet, we're 3rd in voter intention. What that means is that people who've heard the message are voting. Right? No one else has numbers like that. So our path is relatively straightforward. Get more people to hear the message. My 2 competitors have some serious problems. One of them is she doesn't really have a message. And when she tries to present it, it actually hurts her. So that's a challenge for her, because she's got to build credibility in a way that we don't. Right? What do you do if you're her? Do you spend $1 million on billboards? Well, you spent the last 20 years on billboards. And if you're him, you've also got a big challenge, which is everybody already knows you and you're already defined. Probably not quite enough people, once everyone else consolidates around me, hopefully, probably not quite enough people are going to vote for him. So what does he do? Does he change his message? Does he try to rebrand himself? You know, I teach marketing, right? And I know that rebranding is the single hardest thing you can do in marketing. It's not a done deal. We have to work incredibly hard for the next month. I've got to talk to groups like this. You've got to talk to groups. You've got to talk to your friends. You've got to get it going. You've got to keep talking on Twitter, you know. All of this stuff has to keep happening. We need money, right? That comes at the end of the speech, but I'll just put it in now, right? We need money. We're not going to be on Dancing with the Stars or Battle of the Blades, you know, every night, right? It's just not going to happen. But we still need, those signs are expensive. The stuff we're doing, those, you know, 100,000 of those are hitting people's houses this week. The good news is the folks ahead of us who have so much more money than I do are kind of spending stupid. And we, I think, are spending very, very, very smart. Luckily, the team knows what they're doing on that. And we need people to vote. We need people to get out to the polls, particularly because a portion of the folks to whom we appeal are not traditional voters. That makes me very excited. More than half of our campaign volunteers have never volunteered on a campaign before. More than half, what am I saying? More like 80% have never volunteered on a campaign before. Young people are tremendously excited. They have to vote. And we've got to be able to get them out to vote. So the ways you can help are manyfold, right? You know, hopefully you support me. Hopefully you liked what you heard, right? Wear one of these. Wear it everywhere. Right? These things are our secret weapon. I think I ordered 400 of them when we started the campaign. There are now 5,000 of them rotating around the city. The problem is you better be outgoing, because if you wear this thing, everybody is talking to you. The cashier at Safeway is talking to you. The gas station attendant is talking to you. People walking down the street are talking to you, but that's great, right? We're starting those conversations. Help us out on the campaign. Volunteer. We always need more people helping us spread the word, helping us get out to continue to talk to people. That's huge. Get a lawn sign. Talk to your friends about it. That's really key. If you're really, really nice, we'll even give you a purple t-shirt that you can wear around. And if you've got the means, no matter how small, consider making a financial donation and getting us there. The good news is Kate and Lori can help you with all of those things today, here, and now. So don't leave here without any swag. Yes, we can win. Yes, we can win. Yes, we can win. Yes, we can win. Yes, we're going to win, but it's going to take all of your help to get there.
Are you prepared to target the queer community as voters? And if so, do you want to come on my show?
Yes and yes.
But what are you going to, can you say to offer to them? I mean, aside from the fact that we're regular people and need everything that you're offering.
That's the answer, right? That's the answer. We're going to a lot of communities. We're going to ethno-cultural communities. We're going to professional communities. We're going to the artistic community, right? So we're out there in a lot of communities, and oftentimes people ask me this question: what are you going to do for me? And much of the answer is, I'm me, right? And we're going to have open conversations, and we're going to be able to move forward. But the stuff we're doing as a community for all communities is stuff that really applies to you. So, you know, and I'll be quite blunt with you, we had a big discussion about the GLBT community. I refuse to say GLBTQQ TT, it's too confusing. We had a huge conversation about this, and with many of our volunteers who are members of the community, and we came out with, you know, they're just people. Go to the Pride Parade, which I did. Don't go to the dance because that's pandering. And we actually had these conversations, right? And just let people see who you are. And I think that has really helped. The other thing on the politics of it is, quite frankly, really only 3 people can win this race. And I think Calgarians are starting to see that now and starting to say, who's my best alternative out of those 3? I see someone in front of me who used to volunteer, maybe for the candidate that you were talking about. And you know, he's a great guy. He's actually a very close friend. It's kind of weird. 2 of the other candidates are very close friends of mine. It's just weird to be in this situation. But he's doing a great job in his current job. And I want him to continue to do a great job in his current job. So, and I hope people hear that.
Because it's come out after the vandalism and that suddenly, apparently, your religion maybe has been raised. I think it's really important, though, that you make sure that the queer community, I just think that there's a message there that needs to be sure.
You know, I'm extremely hesitant to use those unfortunate events, but I hear what you're saying. And you know what all of you need to hear? This is incredibly important. All of you need to hear this. Is, God, it sucks to have a concrete block thrown through your window. However, in the days since then, people in this city have proven to me what I already knew and what all of you know, which is that ain't Calgary, right? This is not the community we are, and this is not the community we want to live in. The outpouring of support has been extraordinary. We had more lawn signs ordered the day after the vandalism than we had in the 2 weeks prior combined. We had donations. There was a woman who was here tonight who made it kind of a giant donation and said, I hope that this actually replaces all the damage. I never heard of her before. And it says to me that, in fact, as horrible as that incident was, it has galvanized people. And I don't want to take advantage of it, and I don't want to minimize the very real pain and hurt that people feel from discrimination every day, even in this great city. But I also want to highlight that that's not the Calgary we're building, and it's not the Calgary that Calgarians live in. And let's be very blunt here. It's not the Calgary that McIver wants, and it's not the Calgary that Higgins wants either. And on that, we can be united. And I was happy to hear from a bunch of my competitors that they too felt the same. So we're going to move forward. And yes, I'll come on your show.
Homelessness is a huge drain on this city. I was talking to John Marr, who said basically each homeless person costs the city about $140,000 a year. How do we move forward in a continually progressive way to solve this problem, or at least alleviate it?
We're well on our path on that one, thank goodness. The 10-year plan to end homelessness that was authored by one of the people running against me is actually an extraordinary document. It's I'm never supposed to refer to being a professor. It's one of those rules that I have, but I will this time. I use that document in the classes I teach on systems thinking as a wonderful example of how to think about the system as a whole and how to make systemic change. So we're 2 years into the 10-year plan, and we as a city have to make sure that we are abiding by its outcomes and its benchmarks, but we're going to get there. The housing first philosophy in that plan, which essentially says that our shelter system is broken, because people come into shelter and we try to fix them. We try to fix everything that's wrong with them, addictions, mental health issues, and so on, and then they're ready to find a place on their own. And what we know is that it's the opposite, that the lack of housing is the root cause, not a symptom of everything else. So the issue is you got to get them out of the shelter and into a house very quickly, and then they'll have stability from which they can work on their addictions and mental health issues, and we're getting there. The Pathways to Housing program really works well. So I'm confident that if we follow along with the 10-year plan, we'll get there. And you guys probably seen real change in the last year in terms of street homelessness and how things work downtown. And that's not related to the economy, because the really scary thing before was that homelessness was completely disassociated from the economy. It grew when the economy was good, it grew when the economy was bad. And we started to level off, so I'm happy about that. One of the policies that we'll be releasing relatively quickly broadens that to how do we think about poverty and social inclusion in the city more broadly. Well, we're on a good path with homelessness. We're not yet on a good path with people who are working poor and with other issues of social isolation, seniors, recent immigrants, and so on. And one of the things I'm going to be proposing, sneak preview, is to take the concepts behind the 10-year plan on eliminating homelessness and turn it into a 10-year poverty reduction strategy for this city and look at it more holistically. So I think we'll get there. But you're absolutely right. The shelter system is a drain on our resources. It robs people of their dignity and robs them of the ability to be able to move out of their situation. And we've got to turn it on its head, but we've started.
If you're doing something like you want to build a community greenhouse, which is something that we're pretty much lagging behind in the rest of the country, like huge, in a huge manner. Would you do anything to help facilitate those types of projects so they take 1 year or 6 months instead of 3 years to 5 years to get them off the ground?
Yeah, that's an easy question, yes. Okay, moving on. Two things, right? Number one is, obviously those are projects that have significant social value, and we should be able to prioritize them. And number two is, when I talk about streamlining and cutting red tape, stuff like that falls in as well, right? If we make it hard for someone to put solar panels on their house, right? It's the exact same philosophy as making it hard for that guy to build his patio. And we've got to work through all of this and really prioritize stuff that has social value, like what you're talking about, community gardens, greenhouses, small scale and neighborhood-based environmental projects, even soon distributed generation and small scale electricity generation will be viable, and we just got to make it easy for this stuff to happen.
What specific goals do you have for promoting arts and culture? And if you want to keep talent in Calgary, what kind of support do you have for art students to make them stay here?
My background is in the performing arts more than the visual arts. I'm still learning about how we make the visual arts work. I'm going to start talking about spaces and it'll sound like I'm only talking about theaters and stuff. I do encourage everyone to take a look at my responses to the Arts Vote survey when we went into some very specific issues on this. artsvotecalgary.ca, thank you, Mark. We're yet to release our full arts and culture policy. I think that's number 13, so it's coming. But writing it was a bit challenging for me because I've been advocating for the arts in the city for so long that I went back to look at all the stuff that I wrote 5 years ago and 7 years ago on this, and I was like, we need an arm's length agency from the city whose job it is to promote the arts and administer the granting program. Oh, we have that already. We need a comprehensive art space oh, we have that already. But now it's time to move to the next step. So one is spaces. We need a variety of spaces, more spaces in the city for performance and exhibition. I was the chair of the Epcor Center for a long time, and so I've got a good understanding of flagship space, institutional space for established artists. But we also need to work at both ends of the scale. We need to make sure that we make it easy for guys like Mark to be able to perform their space, because it's just much more effective. If Mark gets $5,000, he can create a great theater out of, matchsticks and a little bit of yarn. And I actually personally have a little bit more of a bias towards the DIY stuff on the bottom to let young and emerging artists do it, because it gets to the second part of your question. If I'm finishing theater school or art school and it's really easy for me to start my company or exhibit my work, I'm more likely to stick around. Some artists are going to leave. There's always going to be the draw of Hollywood or Toronto or New York or London, right? But let's let them go. Let them go and learn stuff, right? And bring it back. And I don't have a big problem with that. Number two is we've got to make it easier for artists to live and work in this city. A lot of that has to do with getting them affordable space for living and working. So we have a lot of proposals around affordable housing, legalizing secondary suites, and so on. I'm also a huge fan of zoning changes to allow for live-work studios, particularly in industrial areas. I think that's something we have to work on as well. And I also believe that a lot of my other policy platforms around things like transit, as I said, secondary suites and so on, are stuff that really impact artists to make their lives easier in this community, that they can stick around for longer. And I kind of have a real soft spot for the proposal for the International Avenue Arts Centre, just because, you know, Forest Lawn is still an area where housing is a bit more affordable, and it's a place where artists, if they could express their work in close proximity, would move to do a lot of revitalization for that neighborhood. I think it makes a lot of sense. So thank you so much. So as I said before, if you like what you heard, this is where I sound like a used car salesman. If you like what you heard, then we need your help. Right? And we can help you help us. In fact, all these folks who just came in are not just chronic latecomers. This is actually our campaign leadership team who just came out of another meeting on this stuff, and you guys managed to miss all of my talking. Congratulations, well done. And thank you for your interest in the future of this city. I humbly ask for your support on October 18th, because you know something? We're gonna win. But that's not the point. Right? The point is that starting on October 19th, the real work begins, and together we're going to be able to build that better Calgary that we all want. So thank you. You know, I had an interview with the Evangelical newspaper. And it was a very fascinating interview because the guy was so nice. He was such a friendly guy. And he prefaced every question with, "I'm really sorry to ask you this, but..." And one of the questions was, "Should my readers be scared of you?" What? Because, you know, they're scared of Muslims. And then one of the other questions was, "I hear you attended the Gay Pride Parade. What do you say to my readers for whom that is completely unacceptable?" And I said, "Don't come." And he said, "Is that it?" And I said, "That's it, right?"
Wake up and smell the 21st century.
For part of the community, for the members of that community, this is a very important part of them expressing themselves. I would never force them to come to the Stations of the Cross on Good Friday, and I'm not forcing you to go to their parade. You know, don't come, but let them have it. And you know, he actually was like, "Okay, that's a very mature response, thank you." But, you know, I'm everybody positive, so we've got to be able to get, and they have a right to live here too, you know, so we've got to be able to work as a community.
So what's your opinion on the proposed sale of chunks of NMAX?
I started in civic politics by opposing the then sale of NMAX in 2001. And I wrote a paper saying that the valuation was incorrect. And so I opposed it at that time on strictly financial grounds. Nowadays, I feel like, look, if we got $1 billion for it, it would be irresponsible not to sell it. But here's the thing, we're not going to get $1 billion for it, right? And there is both financial and social value to hanging on to it.
Yeah.
So my initial thinking is we hang on to it.
Right.
I'm also a real big fan of the CEO, and I think he's got some really interesting things to say about distributed generation, moving to new power methodologies, and I don't think a private company would do that. He's willing to take risk in a different way, more patient capital. So my bias is definitely to hang on to it. There is a however.
Okay.
And the however is I have not done the analysis on their debt. And I have been hearing a lot of rumblings that their debt is getting to extremely unsustainable levels. And if that is actually true, then we have to make sure that the taxpayers are not on the hook.
The local food movement.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on what could be done.
It's one of my favorite topics to play with my students when I teach globalization, and to play with my students on, because I always make them wrap their heads around, what about the global food movement? How come it's morally better to help a local farmer and not a global farmer living in poverty in the developing world? So I always have a lot of fun with them on it. It's the thing, right? What's more important, fossil fuels or helping the poorest people in the world? Anyway, so I always have a lot of fun with them on it. That said, there's certainly simple things that we can be doing to encourage more sustainability, right? Community gardening, CSA, right, community supported agriculture, I think is very neat. Not in the city, but there are a number of farms on the outskirts of the city that are engaged in CSA right now. My friend Julie Van Rosendahl, the food writer, is in one of those. And people always ask, so I'll just answer it before you ask it, what about the chickens? I am a fan of trying stuff. And I thought the pilot project to allow 20 families to try it and see how it goes, I didn't particularly have a problem with that. Let's try it, see how it works. There's never going to be 500,000 families in Calgary that want chickens in their backyard, right? Try it, see if it works. That's all I have to say. My friend Paul's still got that hen in his backyard. I don't think it's killed anybody yet.
Is it legal here right now? Or? No.
And Paul Hughes, who's running for mayor, has an illegal one. And he makes a big point of the fact that he has an illegal hen. No roosters, though. No roosters in city limits, not allowed. And in case you're wondering, yes, they lay eggs when there's no roosters. I had to ask.
How are you going to get council on board and prevent the kind of infighting?
It starts from a place of respect, right? Understanding that all 14 of them are good people. The 14 who are there now are good people, and the 14 who will be there afterwards will be some different people. And they're good people, and they come from a place where they want to help the community. But there are some things we need to do, because it doesn't work. These last 3 years have been the worst I've ever seen. Right? And partly it's partly it's the mayor's fault, right? Because he, it was to his advantage to have a bickering council. It allowed him to push his agenda better. He could reach out and grab the 7 votes he needed whenever he needed to. So it's bad. So number one is we're going to have at least 4 new aldermen and a new mayor on this council. That's enough. When you work and you have a work team, sometimes just getting one new voice can help you break down dysfunctional behavior. So the new voices are going to help. Yeah. Number 2 is, better idea number 8, which is about governance reform, is unbelievably boring. I recommend it to people as a sleep aid if you're insomniac, but it's really important. And it talks about sort of procedural things you need to change in council, how you run public hearings, how council does its public presentations, and so on and so on. And those things are really important because it shifts the adversarial nature of the council. So we have to do that. I have another idea, which I'm kind of excited about, that I've been running by the existing aldermen. So one of the problems is that the aldermen are ward aldermen. And so oftentimes they see their job as get the playground zone in Ward 10, and not their responsibilities as a governor of the city as a whole. And so one of the ideas I've had that I'm running by them is to take each of the aldermen and give them an area of citywide responsibility. So Reg, you are the Calgary Transit Czar, Brian is in charge of public safety, right? It doesn't mean you have any extra power, but it means when Calgary Transit comes with their business plan, we go, Reg, does this make sense, right? What's going on in here? It's sort of a trick, right? It's both to get better decisions, but it's also to get the aldermen starting to think about citywide issues and issues outside of their ward to kind of change their positioning and their mindset. So I think that can work.
How would you choose these people? Would it be based on...
Let them pick. Let them pick.
Let them pick the role.
So in fact, the aldermen that I've talked to have all said, I love that idea, but I want roads. Or I love that idea, but I want the police, right? Yeah, let them start. At some point you want to rotate them, I think, but let them start, right?
The guy that's totally not suited to that portfolio, and then
hopefully they rise to the occasion. You got to help these guys do their job better. And right now they don't get any training on how to be a director, how to be a governor, even how to read financial statements, how to ask good questions, or even how to use Robert's rules or how to move motions. They don't, right? The mayor has to model good behavior on this stuff. But also, we just got to train them. We got to invest some time and some money into team building and training. I always say that priority number 1 for the new council the day after I'm elected is the airport tunnel, just because we don't have any time. We've got to get the shovels in the ground fast, right? But priority number 2 and the real first job is to build council into a cohesive, functioning team. And the good news about me is that I kind of sometimes joke that they all hate me equally. But, I appeal to the fiscal conservatives on a lot of things I say. I appeal to the self-described progressives on a lot of things I say. So I have a little bit of respect across the board, and I think I have the ability to bring some heads together and bang some heads together when necessary right at the beginning to kind of go, it's not working, I know it's not working, you're not having fun, I'm not having fun. Let's figure out a way that we can do a better job for citizens. And I remain optimistic that we can get it done.
Reasoning's good. As long as they're reasonable, I think there's hope.
And they're all reasonable. So, no, they're all reasonable. And it's just a matter of sharing responsibility and saying we all have the same goal. We all have a goal to serve citizens better. Let's figure out how to do it.